Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I'm talking about the new album from Pet Shop Boys, Hotspot. Oh boy, it's been a long time since I've talked about an 80s synth pop outfit. Those of you who've been following me for long enough may remember that back in 2017, I basically did some catch-up on some synth pop legends over the course of 3 different comeback albums they came out with in that year. First, I reviewed Depeche Mode's Spirit, then Erasure's World Be Gone, and finally OMD's The Punishment of Luxury, and each review had my typically lengthy In Brief segment, where I broke down my thoughts on their entire previous studio album back catalog, and now I'm gonna do that again. Well, I'd be lying if I said I listened to any of those bands on a regular basis since then, mainly out of me not being much of an 80s guy in general. Each of them had at least 2 projects that really stuck with me and I've hung on to. But I remember a lot of commenters wanted to know next, what did I think of the Pet Shop Boys? They were the other synth pop giant that I never went through. They didn't put out a project in 2017 when I was paying attention. Well, I almost did, but I didn't know about Super when it came out the year before. But finally, 3 years after my synth pop marathoning videos, the Pet Shop Boys gave me another opportunity to digest their catalog with another new album. I've been putting this one off for a while now. The album came out in January. But I felt like it was something I needed to do given what this channel's all about. They feel like a pretty important part of the history of electronic music. And I'll be blunt, the only Pet Shop Boys song I'd heard previously was that track they did with Jean-Michel Jarre back in 2016, Brick England. And I believe my review of that album was my first exposure to this duo at all. I might have possibly heard a track of theirs on some classic rock radio station or something like that and didn't know who it was. And when I told my dad I was doing this video, he said he remembered the song West End Boys. I asked him, isn't it West End Girls? And he was like, that may be what it's called, but you know. But yeah, that's it. Otherwise, you're getting the prototypical young kid newcomer outsider perspective. I think Depeche Mode's better remembered over here in the US, but I have gotten a little taste of how heavily revered the Pet Shop Boys are on the other side of the Atlantic. The second sentence of their Wikipedia article says they were recognized as the most successful artists in UK music history. Not electronic, just artists. That sure is something. I have also had a few fans in my comments try to put into words how big a deal they are over there and just come out stammering, so I guess I'm just gonna leave it at that. They're a big freaking deal, let's just put it that way. No guarantees I'm not gonna screw this up. Apologies in advance if I get some facts wrong. For anyone who's coming into my channel for the first time through this video, I tend not to really read into lyrics that much and focus mostly on the production and instrumentals. But if I end up with the opinion that the superfans will find offensive, then no apologies for that. Opinions are opinions. You don't have to agree with anything I say, and that's fine. But may as well get into it. I listened to all of their 13 previous main studio albums, and here are my thoughts on their discography so far. Alright, got a pretty promising start here. Of the debut albums from synth pop acts I've covered, this was easily the best produced one. Way better sonically developed and better balanced than Speak and Spell, Wonderland, or OMD's self-titled. Neil Tennant has a very distinct and easily recognizable voice, too. Right off the bat, they already got their identity nailed down. Is this the kind of thing I'm gonna listen to all the time? Probably not. It's still very much a product of its time and belongs more on, like, our family dinner playlist than on my own regular listening rotation. But it was enjoyable all around. Definitely the kind of album that just feels like it's entirely made out of big hits without any stinkers. Alright, this one's like the debut, but with higher high points and less consistent. Lyrics stuck out to me more, with quite a few tracks that are about like the BS of Thatcherism and needing to pay bills, or sticking in some social commentary there. It's cool. Not much of a progression sonically, but it's pretty solid stuff anyways. Alright, I was pretty excited for this one, given how it's only a few tracks that are much longer and all stretch over 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes, and yeah, it turns out the hype is well founded for this one. Not huge on that one little 30-second moment in Always on My Mind where Neil Tennant tries to rap, but I really like all the focus on more house and techno structures. None of these tracks feel like they drag despite their lengths, and damn, the orchestra on Left on My Own Devices was awesome. I'll hang on to this one. I think this is probably my personal favorite project of theirs overall. And now we got a turn for the moodier and more down-tempo, and I didn't find it to be all that interesting, honestly. There were a couple of really good standouts where they did nail down some solid atmosphere, see To Face the Truth and My October Symphony, or stick in a good stomping tune like How Can You Expect to Be Taken Seriously. Really enjoyed all those tracks, but the rest I could take or leave. It's okay. This one was stronger though, still carries over quite a bit of the smoothness of the previous album, but applies them to more musically satisfying arrangements, I guess, and mixes it with quite a few more energetic tracks as well, including a gloriously corny cover of The Village People's Go West at the end, which I have no idea how to feel on, but refuses to leave my head either way. Solid stuff, even if it did run on a bit long for my liking, and by the end I felt like I'd had too much dessert. Also, I checked out this album's bonus disc called Relentless, as I heard it was much more dance-heavy and marginally more experimental, a la introspective, and perhaps not surprisingly, I think I was more drawn to that stuff, despite more rapping on the last track. Both projects are good, though. Alright, I'm told this was the beginning of a backslide for the band and a string of less acclaimed releases in a row. And I can see why, given the kinda corny Latin influences introduced, the less than great lyrics about not speaking the language and being single bilingual. Also the occasional leaning on 90s trend chasing and even more Neil Tennant rapping probably didn't help. All that aside, I still enjoyed it. Definite step down from Very, but it still kept my interest the whole way through. Had quite a few parts that reminded me of Jean-Michel Jarre and the stuff he was doing around this time, like if chronology wasn't trying to pass itself off as deeper than it really was. It's not bad. I heard this one got some pretty rough reviews too, though I didn't find it that objectionable either. Really, its biggest crime is that they mostly played it safe and retreaded a lot of already proven ground with less memorable results. But still, the mix of trained synths with the orchestra still consistently set some effective atmosphere. Nothing incredible, probably not gonna listen to it again, but far from the letdown some people have made it out to be. Cool album cover too. Alright, now we're in the 2000s, and, well, this one's at least not a retread. They're including a lot more rock influence here, with mostly guitar-driven material. But, yeah, this one's probably the first just outright no from me. It's not offensive, but it is quite boring. And making a whole album of sappy rock ballads doesn't really flatter their style. Especially when Tennant decided to use auto-tune on a track or two as well, which, yeah, Pet Shop Boys doing auto-tune guitar ballads is just as good as it sounds. Well, this one is a step up, kinda like Nightlife if it had better lyrics. Got more political, has tracks that poke at the War on Terror and George Bush, and good god, the track Numb would have been my shit in 2017. Seemed to basically perfectly describe the way I felt then. But still, I can't say like I feel like I'd want to come back to this one. Instrumentally, it's very average for them, and my actual personal enjoyment of any given track is hit and miss. Not to mention even the best tracks here kinda pale in comparison with the best tracks on previous albums. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not a keeper. Okay, I might be getting a little sick of these guys' style at this point, and the fact that this one just kind of feels like Very again doesn't really help. But I can't complain too much, honestly. It's safe as hell, but it does their usual style as well as you'd hope for. It's a much needed little burst of energy and a stretch of projects. Predictable, but not bad at all. Even the brief spurts of more rock-leaning stuff blow release out of the water. This one, not so much. This one was just a depressing chore to get through. It's like what Nightlife probably sounded like to the people who didn't like that one. And the only memorable moments weren't really memorable for the right reasons. Your early stuff, as you'd guess, is directly about how the duo has waned into irrelevance and only makes the album more pathetic. The Broadway choruses on Hold On make me want to throw up. And Ego Music, while not bad as a joke song and uses Neil Tennant's cringy rapping to its benefit, is still just a joke song, and a kinda underweight one at that. Everything else is stuff you've already heard from them a million times, but with none of the passion or energy. If I wasn't sick of these guys before, I certainly was by the end of this one. Probably their worst album overall. So thank freaking god this album came along, their equivalent to Erasure's Violet Flame, combining their usual style with some more modern EDM and electro house styles that hit way harder and popped out way more than anything they'd done in years without feeling uncharacteristic. This doesn't just break their underwhelming streak, it's one of my big favorites from them overall. I think I might even have another keeper here. And well, this one isn't as great as the previous ones, not quite as tight or punchy, also less serious, but it's at least still good. I'll certainly take it over the drudges they were doing before Electric. I do quite like the handful of deep house throwbacks they do on this one too. This one's nice. Which brings us to here. So I guess all in all with this marathon, I don't think I've been converted into a super fan of these guys, but like with all the other synth pop acts I marathoned 3 years ago, they did have quite a few standouts that I could hang on to, and I'm certainly glad for the experience and the education. These guys almost kind of feel like they have opposite strengths for me to OMD. Those guys were probably the most innovative synth pop outfit I covered, but they're also the ones I'd least be able to pick out from a crowd. Pet Shop Boys didn't always feel like they were ahead of the curve in the same way, probably amplified by the fact that I got to them so much later than the others, but they've easily got the most recognizable style. Neil Tennant is a one-of-a-kind voice, nobody out there sounds like him, besides maybe Giorgio, if that guy had any lick of charisma as a singer. And not to crap on Giorgio, by the way, that guy has put out some legit classics, and the Pet Shop Boys would not exist at all if not for what that guy pioneered. They owe it pretty much their whole career to him, but I digress. Between Tennant's super easily recognizable voice and the very thick, heavily arranged production style they stick to so frequently, it can't really be mistaken for anyone else either. Even in their worst moments, they never lost their identity. Though this fact was also kind of a double-edged sword. Like OMD's worst moments were just totally bland and blah and completely anonymous. PSB's worst moments still had their unique flavor, but hearing it in the context of some really tedious projects made me less look forward to upcoming ones. Which, good or bad, I knew wasn't gonna sound hugely different. Granted, that last point's more of a problem as the result of me digesting these back catalogs all at once, and not something I think long-time fans are gonna care about, so whatever. So now it's time for this newest album, Hotspot, which, I hoped it would be good, but not gonna lie, I wasn't exactly going in with soaring expectations. I already saw Mark from Spectrum Pulse hand out a very middling review to it like 2 months ago, and while other review outlets I saw were generally positive, they were a little more mixed, which did kinda have me worried. I kinda had a feeling my thoughts on this new album itself was gonna be like the least interesting part of the video. That I was going to be talking about a project I wasn't really going to feel strongly either way about, but, you know, they could surprise me. It was coming off 2 pretty solid projects. You never know. So what did we get with Hotspot? It's basically a worse version of their last album. It's far from the worst they've done, but it's almost certainly in the lower half of their catalog. It's an okay project with a few moments that stick out, but nothing they hadn't already done better before. Yeah, so I basically got what I was afraid I was gonna get. Alright, I guess let's talk individual tracks. There were like 3-4 tracks I thought were pretty good. Unquestionably the best moment here was the opener Will-o-The-Wisp, which really brought in some propulsive groove and hit hard, had some real punch and weight to it. Even if it probably wouldn't be a standout on Electric, it wouldn't feel out of place there either. I thought Happy People was pretty fun, another little deep house throwback with those old retro 90s pianos, and some little grooves in the intro and outro that sound almost directly lifted from Mr. Fingers' Amnesia. Also, Monkey Business had one of the best grooves on this project. All retro new disco stuff with those flares of strings that sounded really nice, and some cool vocoder stuff from Chris Lowe. Even if lyrically it's kinda silly, and best if you don't imagine it's coming out of a 65-year-old. Which is actually easier than you might think, given Tennant sounds pretty much exactly the same as he did back in his prime. Perhaps, unfortunately, all 3 of these tracks have Tennant rapping, which I still don't like. I did not like when he rapped on their best projects, and he's no better here, but at least these tracks do enough for me instrumentally to still work in spite of that. And I can also probably highlight the track Dreamland as well. This track features a guest appearance from Ollie Alexander of Years and Years, and I may not be huge on that guy's voice, but the instrumental is satisfying, big, and stomping enough to make up for that. That's a good track too. But there's also some low-key ballads on here, and I always enjoy these guys less when they're in low-key ballad mode. You Are the One, Hoping for a Miracle, and Only the Dark are nothing offensive and can maybe deliver a good melody or two, but I could personally do without. Also, they got one track that's like a throwback to Release, A guitar-driven sappy rock ballad called Burning the Heather that was pretty as well. I guess it helps give the project some more variety, and I do like its glockenspiels, but whatever. And there's also 2 tracks on here that I was less hot on. There's I Don't Wanna, a track that does have some decent groove, and the lyrics are about this guy not wanting to go out and socialize and dance and stuff. I can kind of relate to that. Though it feels like Pet Shop Boys are, like, looking down on that shyness, as if it's some kind of tragedy, and Tennant's putting on this whiny cadence while singing the refrain that I found pretty annoying. Also, kinda hits the wrong note a few months after its release, given everybody in the world now has a pretty good reason to not want to go out dancing. Not that they could have predicted this, but still. Guess it's still not stopping people from mowing their freaking lawn. Also, the album's closer, Wedding in Berlin, is a bit of a head-scratcher, to say the very least. It does kind of bring in some neat, darker grooves that can get my foot tapping and deliver some sense of menace, but that is not a good match for the lyrics, which are about getting married. The instrumental makes this track feel like Tennant is forcing whoever the track is talking to into marrying him, whether they like it or not. It's pushy to the highest possible degree and ends this album on a really unsatisfying and unintentionally creepy note. Also not a fan of how this track keeps stopping dead to play that wedding march song on the organ every couple of bars. This is such a weird goddamn track, and not weird in a good way. But, yeah, that's Hotspot. I mean, I guess the album at least isn't boring. My least favorite projects from these guys are just a total drudge to sit through and are very much boring. This one, at least, is not that. It did have a handful of tracks I liked and wouldn't mind coming back to, and aside from the mindfuck of the closer and mildly annoying I Don't Wanna, I wouldn't say anything on this project is outright bad. But there's also no great tracks here. Nothing on this album is gonna join the pantheon of the all-time best Pet Shop Boys tracks, and it's also not the kind of album that's like trying to tell a story or be anything more than a loose collection of tracks. It doesn't feature their sharpest or most interesting writing either. It's the kind of album that's, pleasant to have on, but I kinda like less and less the more I think about. And it's hard to recommend given they have other projects that sound similar but are much better executed across the board. I guess it's okay, and as always I'm glad it exists as an opportunity to get myself educated on these guys, but I'm just gonna be deleting this one off my iPod at my earliest convenience. Go to Introspective or Electric instead. I'm overall feeling a 5.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time. Will-o-The-Wisp, you wanted such a kind of train.